My pastor, 2 years ago, ruined my family, destroyed my entire family. My wife was shattered. My daughter, she doesn't even talk to me. She ran away from home, all because I flipped out on her after I learned she started an OnlyFans account, and my pastor wanted to embarrass me in front of the whole church. I felt like I had to disown her, but it turns out it was the biggest mistake of my life. I love my family a great deal. My beautiful wife is a great woman. Our love story has been absolutely extraordinary. It's revolved and keeps getting better with each turn. Don't get me wrong, we've both had our ups and downs, and that's a normal occurrence in most relationships at least. But I'm so grateful to have my wife beside me in these trying times. My wife and I have a great daughter, Abby, and although people say that she's a wild card and a handful, we're so proud and blessed to have her. It was clear to see that she was taking her time to experience as many of the beautiful things of her young adult life while she still has the chance. I made sure not to hold back because I knew that I'd given her a solid foundation as a child. Abby was an easygoing teenager in high school. But then I started getting reports of her going to clubs with her friends. I was strict with her when she returned home because I did not want her to go the wrong route, and also because I cherished her a whole bunch. You know, the time for Abby to go off to college arrived, and my wife and I provided her with all that she was going to need. We spared no cent in making sure that she lacked nothing while away from home. I bestowed upon her so much advice that I was sure it would last her a lifetime. Days, weeks, and months flew by. Everything was in good condition, apart from the fact that we missed Abby solely. We were all right. We put a lot of energy into our work and volunteered more. We even started volunteering at NGOs, went to church more frequently, and participated in many church activities. Consequently, we found ourselves in church more frequently, and we started hearing rumors about my family. At first, we heard that our dear Abby was not even in school. That was impossible because I personally supervised her admission process, and I had a friend who lectures at the college that she attends to. To be on the safe side, guys, I called this friend and asked him to confirm if my daughter was really a student at the college or not. He sent me irrefutable evidence that Abby's admission was legitimate and properly done. Well, this cleared my doubts, and I knew the rumors were unfounded. The next rumor that floated through my ears was that my sweet Abby had no time to attend classes because she was busy attending every party on campus. I wasted no time in checking this out because it sounded as baseless as the first one, and also because I had better things to do than chase around every rumor I heard. I wondered why people were invested in spreading false rumors about other people. It looked to me like a silly attempt at getting attention for what was unimportant. I knew I was respected in my religious circle, and that I was an important figure in the church to some extent at least, so I expected a bit of slander. What better way than to use my own daughter? My decision to ignore the rumors worked because after that time there was no more. I did not bother to check, and no rumor came to me. Things were quiet for a while, and life was simple and uncomplicated, until the week of the seminar in our church. See, the seminar was an event we were all looking forward to. My wife and I were excited, and we volunteered to help out with the preparations, of course. On the day of the event, we walk in, and we were bestowed with stares. It looked like something happened in our absence, and since nobody was bold enough to come to our face, we ignored these crazy looks and focused on the event. My wife and I walked hand in hand to our assigned seats, and I finally heard what was going on. The gist was that my daughter Abby created an account on OnlyFans and was flaunting it all over her social media handles. It sounded quite simple, but that was not the end of it all. They called me incompetent, a male who was incapable of heading a home, which was why my daughter was bold enough to create such an account on OnlyFans, became an active user, and even go ahead to share it on other social media platforms in a bid to reach a large audience. My heart had broken into 1,000,000+1 pieces. I mean, it really hurt. But I could not do anything, and firstly, it was just a rumor, and secondly, no one had said anything to my face yet. I made a mental note to give Abby a call once we got home to find out what I could know. The program started, and yes, I enjoyed it. Right up to the moment I was called on stage to give a speech on a pre-arranged topic. My pastor had a frown on his face, but I paid him no mind. because honestly, he had a scowling face whenever he was in church. I started talking, but nobody was listening. It was noisy, and people kept looking at me in a weird way. What started as a murmur became an uproar. My pastor walked over to me and snatched up the microphone from my hand. I was stunned and asked if anything was the matter. He looked at me in the eyes and asked why I was acting dumb. I heard my wife gasp from the audience, and that was the moment I knew something had gone horribly wrong. I smiled politely and asked my pastor what the issue was and if I could continue. He paid me absolutely no mind as he turned away to face the congregation. He spoke loudly and clearly while pointing at me. He said that I was a disgrace to the church. I allowed my daughter to go wayward. So wayward that she went ahead to create an OnlyFans account, spoiling the name of my family and consequently the church. He pointed out how I made everything worse by pretending not to know exactly what was happening. He said that I was an accomplice to evil deeds and speculated that I must have done far worse things outside of the church. I tried to speak up, but he shushed me and continued on his tirade. He said I was not worthy of even showing my face in the church anymore and that I had lost that privilege. He concluded by saying that I was a failed parent. I was very confused as to where this outburst was coming from. In the midst of my confusion, the pastor announced that I was suspended and should not be allowed to return until I had put my home in order. I climbed down from the stage and walked towards my wife, who looked like she was about to cry. I held on to her as I led her away from the church, and I could feel the eyes behind us bore holes into our skin. I drove us home, and all through the ride, my wife did not even utter a word. Rather, she was typing frantically on her phone. I guess she was trying to do her own research about the issue. And I knew from her sobs that she was seeing certain things on our daughter's page that supported the accusation. When we got home, I walked straight to the bathroom. I needed to take a shower and clear my head, and after I was done, I called Abby. The conversation was brief, and I asked her to get home as soon as she could. She tried asking me what's so urgent, but I reiterated I need her home now. Abby finally arrived, and I wasted absolutely no time in ripping into her. I told her that since she wanted to go wild and become a member of the OnlyFans community, I wasn't going to lend a hand in that. I asked her to go to her room, pack everything she holds dear, and leave this house now. In clear terms, I told her I was disappointed with what she did, and henceforth she was no longer my daughter. My wife was confused. She asked if I knew what I was doing. She asked why I did not discuss anything with her, but I had no response to any of her questions. She was really distraught with my decision and tried to change my mind. I couldn't even listen to my wife. I knew I wasn't going to change my mind, not after the humiliation I faced in church. My daughter was more than confused. She did not even know why I had come to that drastic conclusion to disown her. She told me to at least give her an opportunity to explain her side of the story, but I could not bring myself to do it. Just to hear the excuse that she must have prepared. I could not even look my darling Abby in the eyes. I asked myself if I had somehow lent a hand to Abby's reckless behavior, but I could not come up with a concrete answer. Abby wasted no time begging. She packed her stuff and did not glance back as she banged on the door on her way out. I felt like a part of me just left, but I was left with no choice. My dear wife actually cried her eyes out that night. She kept begging me to reconsider, but hey, I refused. I discovered yesterday that my wife has been connecting with Abby behind my back. I was not happy with my wife sneaking around. It felt like backstabbing, you know. I confronted her about my findings, and she confessed that she was getting heartaches that she could not bear anymore. That was why she reached out to Abby. I warned her to desist from such a thing and never to try it again. She agreed with me and apologized, and we've been welcomed back to the church, and though my pastor commended me for showing that I am not a weak man, I can't help but deny the absence of my only child in my life. It's causing me pain. Do you think that I should reach out to her and damn the consequences from my religious circle? What should I do? What would you do if you were me? What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. So today's story is a very, very interesting one. We find ourselves with a dad who doesn't know what to do. If anybody's been in such a situation, drop a comment down below and let's talk about this one. My name's Mr. Reddito. Thank you for joining. And if you guys are new to the channel, consider subscribing for daily videos. Here's the first update. It's been a week, and for anyone wondering, it's been 2 agonizing years since I last spoke to Abby. Things have not been that good at home either. There have been different types of emotions, and the most prominent one is sadness in our hearts. My wife withdrew from every form of having fun or any form of relaxation. This lack of communication between us and Abby was really heartbreaking. She became a shadow of her former self. She was no longer excited about doing things that she used to love. She started complaining about an ache in her chest a year after I disowned her, and we visited the hospital. The doctors conducted a series of tests and examinations, and my wife was diagnosed with liver damage. The doctors told us it was not a death sentence by any means. They recommended some specialists to us, and I was determined to stay positive for both of us, because my wife had already given up the fight. She told me that there was no point in living if she could not even see her own daughter. I was sad, because I could not grant my wife her utmost wish, but I tried to stay positive nonetheless, and her health kept deteriorating, and she kept asking to see Abby. I kept holding back and telling her to focus on getting better, honey, but she simply told me Abby's absence is a huge contribution to her deteriorating health. I paid her no mind, and I reasoned that she was just saying that in a bid to change my mind. She was always in the hospital, she barely went home, and I was always there to look after her. It was a little bit too much for me, so I decided to visit my pastor and ask for some moral support. He was surprised to see me, but I was adamant and refused to leave. He granted me an audience and asked what I came for. I told him I came for some moral support because my wife was ill. He commended me for being steadfast and promised to pray for my wife, who would be my moral support. My wife's health was getting worse and worse, to be honest with you. She pleaded with me to let Abby come see her. Well, this time around I did it. I caved and decided to visit Abby at school, where she stays with a friend. She was very displeased to see me and wasted no time in asking me to get out. I tried talking to her, but she interrupted me and started calling me all sorts of names. She called me blind, ignorant, manipulative, a father who chose to stay by the side of a hypocritical man instead of his own daughter. I was clueless as to where this outburst was coming from, but I was not interested in hearing what she had to say. Oh no. I was more worried about passing on the message my wife had me deliver to her. I tried speaking one more time, but I wasn't given the chance. Abby turned around, and I did not wait another second. I also turned and left. I got back to my ailing wife and gave her the sad news that her daughter was not interested in seeing her. My wife did not believe it, but I had no way of convincing her. My wife did not relent in her request to see Abby, and each time she asked it broke my heart, because I could not provide that for her. I kept doing the best I could, but I guess it was not enough. The doctors were concerned that my wife's body was rejecting the treatment, and my wife told them not to worry because her ailment was more about the fact that she misses her daughter greatly and less about the liver damage. I tried everything to make her happy again, but it wasn't working. A little while later, my wife's request changed, and she modified it and started asking that I promise her. I wondered exactly what she wanted me to promise, and she said that I should promise that I'd someday reach out to Abby. I gave no indication that I was going to keep the promise, but I also did not dash her hopes. Nonetheless, I'm here to stand by my wife no matter what happens in the near-distant future. I believe she's going to get better soon enough. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I stood by my daughter these 2 years ago. Update number 2. Well, guys, I hate to do this. This update's coming to you 2 months after my wife's death. Yes, sadly she passed. I practically lived at the hospital and visited home once in a blue moon. She was so ill that she became a shadow of her former self. It was a struggle looking into those sunken eyes that were formerly so mesmerizing, as beautiful as Abby's. She was so emaciated that I had to look at pictures to remember what she looked like. At some point, she asked me to stop coming to see her and to hire a caregiver instead. I understood. She did not want me to see her in this state, but I could not bring myself to abandon her because that was exactly what it would feel like. I went home to freshen up and cook a meal for my wife. When I returned to the hospital, there was no meal to give her. She was no longer in her room. I was heartbroken when I got the news from the doctor that she's gone, and I spent my days staring into space and, well, that's it. I kept asking myself what I did to deserve all this. I almost went crazy after I realized that the absolute love of my life had left me and, well, she's not coming back, and only thing I'm staring at is a cold dinner. The fact that I was not on speaking terms with my only child was not helping my predicament in the least. I wished for so many things, but most of all, I wish my wife was still breathing beside me. Where was the God that I abandoned my only daughter for now when I needed him the most? I wish I had actively involved my wife in making that decision on the day I rashly disowned our only daughter. Without hearing her side of the story, what exactly was I thinking? Look at me now. The house was sparkling clean, not because I chose to clean it, every nook and cranny, but because that was the only thing I could do as not to be absolutely consumed by grief. I barely ate. I just kept cleaning and cleaning until my hands bleed. Maybe that was my reward for being callous when making life decisions, life-changing decisions. I was an unhappy man, but I still wanted to make my wife happy one last time. So I did it. I sent a message to Abby, informing her about her mom's death and giving her information about the burial. I did not expect her to be there, especially after our last encounter, where she did not even want to inhale the same air as me. Back at home, I was more lonely than I've ever been, but my pastor and some church members visited me in condolences. I do think I was happy for their presence, and somehow it lifted my spirits a bit. On the funeral day, I was dressed in the saddest piece of clothing I could find. I caught a glimpse of my Abby. She was dressed in a dainty black gown her mother had bought her back before she got admitted to college. I remembered that day clearly when we were all happily shopping, and I felt a pang of, guilt. I was genuinely surprised she came, but I paid her no mind at all. All the members of our church seemed to have had the same thought process because they avoided her like the plague. Or maybe it's because our pastor was watching vigilantly and was ready to suspend anyone who dared to interact with her. I couldn't believe I was ashamed to stand next to my own daughter at my wife's funeral. It hurt, but I could not lose the one form of socialization that had kept me sane and given me a semblance of peace: my church. I could see how uncomfortable she was, and I did not blame her for leaving within less than 20 minutes of arriving. She looked so disappointed and angry as she strutted away. I found myself subconsciously asking my wife for forgiveness, because I realized at that point in time, I was the one to blame for how my family fell apart. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I realized it eventually. I was a little ashamed about the entire fiasco, I was, but I forgot all about it. Immediately, my pastor walked over to me and gave me a pat on the back. He commended me for doing the right thing. Nonetheless, I must ask the question: am I really doing the right thing by keeping my only daughter away? Will my wife be happy with me wherever she is? Would a good father choose the congregation over his one and only beloved daughter, no matter what she's done? I don't know. And there's nobody here to answer it. Update number 3. It's been a month since the last update, guys. The burial ceremony was concluded, and I was faced with reality. My current reality was that I was a husband without a wife, and I was a father without a daughter. I finally summoned the courage to visit Abby because I missed her, and was beginning to feel too lonely in this big house. I went with the family heirloom as an icebreaker, and I was not delusional, so I wasn't expecting a warm embrace. I just wanted a glimpse of my daughter to try to erase the disappointed look she gave me on the day of my wife's burial. It was not an easy task. So after making up my mind to visit Abby, I needed another dose of confidence to actually drive down to Abby's school. I played too many scenarios in my head based on the last time I went there. Consequently, I developed cold feet each and every time. I drove halfway a couple of times, but had to drive back because I somehow knew I was not ready. I thought of possibly getting her a gift, but I kicked against the idea because she may say that I was trying to bribe her. I finally decided on going there with the family heirloom. I reasoned that it would be a good icebreaker and she would not accuse me of trying to bribe her or anything of that sort. I got to her dorm. I knocked on the door. I was rather apprehensive when I reached that door, and I nudged the door open after being invited inside. The dorm was full of girly things, books, posters, and a lot of clothing. I stepped in and was faced with 3 pairs of eyes, one green, one blue, and Abby's golden brown. I smiled and waved awkwardly at the other girls. The other 2 girls hurriedly left the room, leaving Abby alone with me. I was apprehensive and waited for her to say something, anything. She reluctantly asked what I wanted. I started by apologizing for not coming to see her soon, for keeping her away from the house and her ailing mom, for arriving without an invitation, and lastly for treating her like an outcast on the day of her mom's funeral. I gazed into those golden browns, and for a moment I thought they softened, but she just chuckled, sadly, and everything I said she would just chuckle. She reminds me that I had somehow forgotten to apologize for the day I suddenly called her home, only to ask her to pack everything and get out, everything that belonged to her, and to leave. She also reminded me that I did not apologize for disowning her in the twinkle of an eye based on the rumors I heard, and decided it's not important to hear her side of the story. I did not even have the heart to ask if those rumors were true in the moment because I was definitely losing my chance. I told her that she was correct, I was wrong. I finally understood where I had gone wrong, and I asked her to please forgive me. She let go of all the emotions that had been bottled up all these years. She hotly demanded to know why I had let a hypocritical man ruin our family. Abby did not let me respond. She continued with her barrage, exposing all she knew about my pastor. Guys, my jaw dropped. So, get this. Apparently the pastor who had the, audacity to suspend me from coming to church was in a sexual relationship with one of Abby's friends, while his wife was overseeing a different branch in another state. I reminded my daughter about the person she spoke ill of and the gravity of the accusation her tongue just made, but she immediately pulled out her phone and showed me everything I needed to see. I had to sit down because the revelation was too heavy for my legs. I couldn't believe it. Abby noted that she had indeed posted raunchy photos of herself on her social media, but some people began to peddle the rumor about her owning an OnlyFans. I started pleading with Abby all over again for being so fickle because of the rumors and noted that even though they were true, I should not have acted the way that I did. I still can't believe that the pastor I held in high esteem could be this evil. He had caused such a ripple effect in my home, and I think it's time to repay the favor. Update number 4. This is the final update of the story. I've been planning on scheming. It's just a natural reaction for me to want to get back at this man, that dang pastor. I don't care if you judge me, it's been about 2 months since I visited Abby. That day I kept apologizing after she exposed my pastor's evil deeds. Guys, she went on to ask me to leave, saying that she was still hurt and needed time to heal from all the sad events that she's been going through. I respected her wishes and returned to my house. I reached out to her every chance I got, and I left messages and called frequently. I even sent emails. I was doing all that in a bid to make up for all those years of not communicating. It was a one-sided communication for some time until one weekend. Abby finally returned one of my calls. We talked and talked and talked, catching up and making plans for how our future would pan out. I was excited that Abby was over on the other end of the phone, and it showed. After we had worked out our understanding, Abby told me I was forgiven, and then I went ahead to ask her to help me make sure that the pastor who set all this in motion did not go scot-free. I already had a plan, but I could not execute it on my own. Abby agreed and promised to bring every ounce of evidence that she could find. This was exactly what I needed, evidence to back up all my claims and accusations. Abby told me that she could get more proof of the pastor's cheating and promiscuous lifestyle. Since Abby would be in charge of gathering the evidence, I busied myself with the task of presenting the evidence in the most chaotic manner I could possibly think of. Yep, I thought long and hard about this, but I came blank. That did not deter me at all, and then I had that aha moment. What other way could be more chaotic than bringing all these evil deeds to light? The pastor humiliated me publicly. I don't see why I shouldn't return the favor. Not long after my eureka moment, the perfect opportunity presented itself right there in front of me. It was my pastor's 60th birthday. The church elites decided to throw some lavish celebratory dinner for our pastor, and I was on the planning committee, believe it or not. Abby called to inform me that the evidence was ready for me. She shared with me how her friends were cooperative and ready to give all the conversation, audio, sultry pictures, and videos between herself and the pastor. It was finally the day of the celebration. The venue was exquisitely designed, and a majority of the guests were members of our church, and that was absolutely perfect to me. Our beloved pastor arrived, and he was ushered in to sit at the head of the table. a vantage point to witness all what was happening. Members of the elite circle took turns giving speeches and applauded our pastor. When it got to my turn, I announced that I had a gift for the pastor. The congregation applauded, and my pastor was beaming ear to ear. I signaled the strippers I hired for this specific purpose, and they walked in. They started dancing very seductively. I faced the audience, and I saw very confused faces, if you can imagine. Well, one of the dancers walked directly to the pastor and attempted to give him a lap dance. He jumped up and ordered security to get these girls out of here. He faced me and asked if I had lost my damn marbles. Well, I laughed long and hard. He probably thought I did. Then I asked him why he was pretending to be offended in front of the congregation when that was exactly the kind of fun he loved having outside of the church. Burn! I gave him no time to respond as I started presenting evidence after evidence. On the screen, that was formerly used to display Happy 60th Birthday, Pastor. I mean, we're talking naked photos, sultry videos, audio, and the text conversation that kept dancing on the screen. It was clear to see that everything was true. The hall, you could drop a pin and hear it. But suddenly there was an uproar. People began throwing things in the pastor's direction, verbally and physically abusing him, and the pastor ran out in shame. Days later, news of his divorce reached us. That was no longer my issue. I was more concerned with the fact that Abby and I rekindled our relationship. She comes back home during the holidays and we spend time together. You know, I do feel better knowing the pastor who caused this drift in my family has gotten what he deserves. But let me ask you this, what would you have done?